The station never slept. Nexus Station hung at the crossroads of three great territories, and ships came and went at all hours. Freighters from the Velith colonies, passenger liners carrying Coran traders, small courier vessels that darted between the larger ships like fish around whales. The docking bays were always busy, always loud, always full of life, except for Docking Bay 7. Bay 7 sat at the far end of the station's commercial sector, away from the bright lights and busy traffic. The other bays had teams of engineers, expensive equipment, and long waiting lists. Bay 7 had one human, a set of old tools, and a reputation that spread through whispers. Marcus Cole worked alone. He was 57 years old, with gray hair cut short and hands that were rough from decades of work. His face had deep lines, and his eyes were the color of tired metal. He wore the same thing every day, a simple jumpsuit with too many pockets, each one holding a tool he might need. The Velith Dockmaster, a tall creature with blue skin and 4 arms, had stopped trying to understand him years ago. Marcus arrived at the station 15 years back, asked for work, and never left. He took the worst shifts, the impossible jobs, the ships that other engineers called scrap. And somehow, every single one of them flew again. Tonight, Marcus stood beneath a Coran cargo hauler that had seen better days. The ship was 50 years old, at least. Its hull was patched in a dozen places. Its engine made sounds that no healthy engine should make. The Coran captain had begged the other bays for help, but they all said the same thing. Not worth fixing. Buy a new ship. Then someone mentioned Bay 7. Someone always did. Marcus ran his hand along the ship's belly, feeling the metal, listening to the sounds it made. Ships talked to him. Not in words, but in vibrations and heat and the small noises that told him where they hurt. This old hull was tired, yes, but it wanted to fly. He could feel it. He pulled himself up into the maintenance shaft and began to work. 3 hours later, a young Methani appeared at the bay entrance. The Methani were small beings, barely reaching Marcus's chest, with large eyes and skin that changed color with their emotions. This one's skin was a nervous yellow as she stepped inside. Her name was Kira, and she had been assigned to Bay 7 as an apprentice 2 months ago. She was supposed to learn from Marcus, but mostly she watched. He rarely explained what he was doing. He just did it, and she tried to understand. "You are still working," she said. It was not a question. Marcus's voice came from somewhere inside the ship. "Engine needs me." Kira moved closer, her skin shifting to a curious orange. The other apprentices finished hours ago. They went to the recreation deck. "There is a festival tonight. Music from 12 different worlds. Sounds nice. You could come." A pause. Then Marcus slid out from the maintenance shaft, wiping his hands on a rag. He looked at Kira with something that might have been kindness. There's always another ship that needs fixing. "You go. Have fun." Kira's skin flickered with frustration. "You never go anywhere. You never do anything except work. In 2 months, I have not seen you leave this bay." Marcus smiled. It was a small smile, the kind that held something back. "This bay has everything I need." He turned back to the ship, and Kira knew the conversation was over. She had learned that about him. Marcus Cole was not rude, never unkind, but there was a wall around him that no one could climb. She left for the festival, her skin still orange with questions. She could not answer. Marcus worked until the station's lights dimmed for the night cycle. The Coran hauler's engine hummed now, smooth and strong. He had replaced parts that others would have missed, adjusted systems that others would have ignored. The ship would fly for another 50 years if the captain took care of it. He climbed down from the maintenance scaffold and walked to his quarters. The room was small, attached to the back of the bay. A bed, a small kitchen, a shelf with a few books. Nothing on the walls. Nothing personal except for one thing, a door at the far end, sealed with a lock that only Marcus could open. He did not open it tonight. Most nights he did not. But sometimes, when the work was done and the station was quiet, he would stand before that door and press his palm against the cold metal. Just for a moment. Just to remember. Tonight, he was too tired. He ate a simple meal, drank a cup of tea, and lay down on his bed. Sleep came slowly, as it always did. His mind was not good at being quiet. The next morning, the Quarren captain came to Bay 7. He was a large being, covered in thick brown fur, with a face that showed every emotion he felt. Right now, that face showed disbelief. "It runs," he said. "It runs better than when I bought it." Marcus shrugged. "Good ship. Just needed some care." The captain looked at him for a long moment. "They said you were different. The others, they talk about you like you are some kind of ghost. The human who fixes everything. I just fix ships." "No." The captain shook his head. "I have met many engineers. They see problems. You see something else. Something more." Marcus did not answer. He never knew what to say when people talked like this. He just did his work. That was all. That was enough. The captain paid him, adding extra that Marcus tried to refuse. Then the hauler lifted off, rising through the bay doors and disappearing into the black ocean of space. Marcus watched it go, feeling the small satisfaction he always felt when a ship returned to the sky. Behind him, the sealed door waited. 12 sets of armor stood in the darkness beyond it. 12 faces smiled in holopictures that no one else had ever seen. Marcus turned back to his workshop. A Velith transport had just arrived, its starboard thruster making an ugly, grinding noise. He gathered his tools and walked toward it. There was always another ship that needed him. And as long as that was true, he had a reason to keep going. The ghost could wait a little longer. The Sara should have left. The Ascendant Grace was repaired, running better than it had in centuries. Her summit waited. The fate of worlds depended on her being there. But she could not stop thinking about the human engineer. She had lived for 312 years. She had met kings and generals, scientists and artists, beings of every species the galaxy had to offer. She had learned to read people the way others read books. And yet Marcus Cole was a page written in a language she did not understand. His hands had been burned. She kept thinking about that. He had worked for 18 hours, burning himself on hot metal and sparking wires, and he had never complained. Never even mentioned it. As if pain was just another tool he carried in that warm bag of his dot. What makes a man like that? She wondered. What shapes someone into a person who fixes ships the way others breathe? She told her captain to delay departure by 1 day. Important diplomatic business, she said. He did not question her. No one questioned a high envoy. The next morning, the Zara walked to docking bay 7. Marcus was working on a small shuttle, replacing parts that looked older than he was. He glanced up when she entered, then returned to his work. "Your ship is fixed," he said. "There is nothing more I can do." "I know." The Zara moved closer, stepping carefully around the tools and parts scattered across the floor. "I did not come about my ship. I came to see you." Marcus paused. His hands went still on the machine. "Why?" "Because I do not understand you." She said it simply, without pride or pretense. "I have lived for 3 centuries. I have met thousands of beings. But you are different. I want to know why." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he put down his tools and stood, wiping his hands on that same rag he always carried. "There is not much to understand. I fix ships. That is all." "No." The Zara shook her head. "That is not all. I watched you work on my vessel. You were not just repairing it. You were speaking to it, listening to it, as if it were alive." Marcus looked at her, and for just a moment, She saw something flicker behind his eyes. Something old and heavy and sad. Then it was gone, hidden away behind that calm face. "Ships carry people," he said quietly. "They carry hopes and dreams and lives. When a ship dies, sometimes the people inside die too. So I listen to them. I try to hear what they need. Because if I can keep them flying, I can keep the people inside them safe." It was the most he had ever said to her. The most he had ever said to anyone in years. The Zara felt something shift inside her. This was not just an engineer. This was a man carrying a weight she could not see. "May I see your workshop?" she asked. Marcus hesitated. It was the first time she had ever seen him hesitate. "There is a room in the back," he said slowly. "A private room. You must not enter it." "Why not?" He did not answer. He simply turned and walked toward the small quarters attached to the bay, and the Zara followed. The workshop was simple and clean. Tools hung on the walls in perfect order. A small workbench held projects in various stages of completion. The bed in the corner was neatly made. There were no decorations, no pictures, nothing personal at all, except for the door at the back of the room. It was heavy metal, sealed with a lock that glowed faintly blue. Marcus saw her looking at it, and his face tightened. "That room is private," he said again. His voice was different now, harder. "I understand." But she did not understand. And the door called to her with a voice she could not ignore. They talked for a while longer. Marcus answered her questions with short words and long silences. He was 57 years old. He had come to the station 15 years ago. Before that, he did not say. She did not ask. Then an alarm sounded through the bay. Emergency repair request. A passenger liner had lost power near the station, drifting toward an asteroid field. 300 people aboard. Marcus grabbed his toolkit without a word and ran. The Zara watched him go, then turned to look at the sealed door. She knew she should not open it. He had asked her not to. It was his private space, his secret, and she had no right to violate that trust. But she was 3 centuries old, and in all that time, she had never learned to ignore a mystery. The lock was advanced, but Kareth technology was older and cleverer. She bypassed it in minutes, feeling guilty even as her fingers worked. The door slid open with a soft hiss. She stepped inside. The room was dark at first, and then lights flickered on, responding to her presence. The Zara stopped breathing. 12 sets of human combat armor stood in a circle around the room. They were old, scarred by battle, but they had been repaired with loving care. Every scratch had been filled. Every dent had been smoothed. They gleamed like monuments in a sacred temple. Each suit had a name engraved on the chest plate. Dog tags hung from every neck guard. And beside each suit floated a hollow picture. Young human faces, laughing, alive, frozen forever in moments of joy. In the center of the circle stood a 13th suit. This one was different, heavier, darker. It bore the scars of terrible violence. Burns and holes and the marks of weapons that had almost killed the person inside. The name on this suit was Marcus Cole. The rank was sergeant. The unit was the 7th Terran Shock Infantry. Beneath it, a small plaque glowed with soft light. The Zara bent down to read the words. Helios 4. We held the line. I'm sorry I could not bring you home. The Zara stood in the center of that circle of ghosts, surrounded by the faces of the dead, and finally understood. Marcus Cole was not just an engineer. He was a survivor. A soldier who had lost everyone he loved and spent the rest of his life trying to make up for it. Every ship he fixed was a debt repaid. Every engine he healed was an apology to the 12 faces watching him from this hidden room. The door opened behind her. Marcus stood in the entrance. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the hollow pictures, playing their endless loops of memory. "You should not be here," Marcus said. His voice was barely a whisper. The Sara turned to face him. Her ancient eyes were wet with something she had not felt in decades. "Tell me," she said. "Tell me what happened to them." Marcus looked at her, then at the circle of armor, then back at her dot, and finally, after 40 years of silence, he began to speak. The Ascendant Grace was the most beautiful ship Marcus had ever seen. It hung in the emergency dock like a sculpture made of silver and light, its curves perfect, its design ancient beyond measuring. The Kirith had been building ships when humans still lived in caves. This vessel showed every year of that knowledge dot. It also was not moving. Marcus heard the story from the Velith dockmaster, who told it with all four arms waving in excitement. A diplomatic cruiser, carrying High Envoy the Sara herself, had suffered a drive failure near the station. The Kirith were one of the oldest species in the galaxy. They had seats on every important council. They almost never asked anyone for help. For 3 days, they had refused all offers of assistance. Kirith engineers worked on the problem alone, speaking to no one, letting no one aboard. But whatever was wrong with the Ascendant Grace, they could not fix it. And now the High Envoy had a peace summit to attend. Wars hung in the balance. Millions of lives depended on her arriving on time. The dockmaster found Marcus in Bay 7, elbow deep in a transport engine. "They are asking for you," he said. Marcus looked up. "Who?" "The Kirith." The dockmaster's blue skin had gone pale with disbelief. "The High Envoy herself. Station administration told her about you. She wants the human from Bay 7. Marcus wiped his hands slowly. "They do not like humans. They do not like anyone. But they like being stranded even less." An hour later, Marcus stood at the entrance to the Ascendant Grace, his worn toolkit in his hand. 2 Kirith guards blocked his path. They were tall and thin, with skin like polished wood and eyes that glowed faintly gold. They looked at Marcus the way someone might look at an insect. "You are the human engineer," one said. It was not a question. "I am. The High Envoy will see you. Do not touch anything without permission. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not embarrass yourself." Marcus said nothing. He had heard worse. They led him through corridors of impossible beauty. The walls seemed to flow like water frozen in time. Lights floated without any visible source. Everything was elegant, ancient, perfect. And yet Marcus could hear it beneath the beauty. The ship was sick. Its heartbeat was wrong. The High Envoy waited in the command chamber. The Sara was old, even by Kirith standards. Her skin had darkened to the color of deep earth, and her eyes held the weight of centuries. She wore robes that probably cost more than Marcus would earn in 10 lifetimes. She did not stand when he entered. She barely looked at him. "You are the one they recommend," she said. Her voice was cold. "A human. Your species has been flying among the stars for barely 300 years. My people built vessels like this when your ancestors were learning to make fire." Marcus met her eyes. He did not bow. He did not look away. "Your vessel is broken," he said simply. "Would you like me to fix it, or would you like to tell me more about fire?" The chamber went silent. The guards stiffened. No one spoke to a High Envoy like that, but something flickered in the Sara's ancient eyes. Surprise, perhaps. Or maybe the smallest bit of respect. "Show him to the engine room," she said. The Kirith engineers did not want him there. Marcus could feel their anger as he walked among them, examining the drive system that powered the Ascendant Grace. They had been working on it for 3 days. They had tried everything they knew. And now a human, a primitive creature from a primitive species, was going to look at their work. Marcus ignored them. He moved around the engine slowly, touching it here and there, listening, feeling. The Kirith technology was advanced, yes. Beautiful, yes. But machines were machines, no matter who built them. They all had the same needs. They all spoke the same language if you knew how to listen. After 20 minutes, he stopped. Your flow regulator is mounted wrong, he said. It has been wrong since the ship was built. The vibration has been wearing down your primary coupling for years. That is why your drive failed. The lead Kirith engineer, a tall male with contempt written on his face, stepped forward. Impossible. This ship was designed by the greatest minds of our civilization. A human cannot possibly understand. There. Marcus pointed. And there. And there. 3 design flaws. The regulator mounting. The coolant pathway that crosses too close to the power feed. The harmonic dampener that is tuned to the wrong frequency. He turned to look at the engineer. Your greatest minds made mistakes. It happens. Do you want me to fix them, or do you want to keep telling me how primitive I am while your envoy misses her summit? No one spoke. The engineer's face twisted with fury, but he had no answer. The Sara's voice came through the ship's communication system. She had been listening. Fix it, she said. All of it. Marcus worked for 18 hours. He did not eat. He did not sleep. He did not speak except to ask for tools or parts. The Kirith engineers watched him, first with anger, then confusion, then something they did not want to admit. He moved through their engine like a surgeon, cutting away problems they had never seen, healing wounds they did not know existed. His hands never hesitated. His eyes never lost focus. He was not a human working on an alien machine. He was something else entirely. An artist, a healer, a man who saw the soul of ships dot when he finished. The Ascendant Grace hummed with a voice it had not had in centuries. The drive was not just repaired. It was better than new. 12% more efficient than its original design. The lead engineer checked the readings 3 times. His hands were shaking. The Sara came to the engine room herself. She walked slowly around the drive, listening to it sing, and then she turned to face Marcus Cole. How? She asked. Her voice was different now. The coldness was gone. How did you do this? Marcus picked up his toolkit. His hands were burned in 2 places. His eyes were red from exhaustion. Ships want to fly, he said. I just helped them remember how. He walked toward the exit, then stopped. Your summit is important, he said without turning around. Millions of lives, I hear. Maybe you should stop worrying about who fixes your ship and start worrying about how to save them. He left the Ascendant Grace and returned to Bay 7. Behind him, the Sara stood in silence. In 300 years, no one had ever spoken to her like that. And no one had ever made her feel so small. She was beginning to understand that she knew nothing about humans. Nothing at all. Marcus sat down on the floor of the memorial room, his back against the wall. The Sara lowered herself beside him, moving slowly, as if she was afraid any sudden movement might make him stop talking. He did not look at her. He looked at the armor, at the faces of his friends, at the ghosts he had carried for 40 years. Helios 4 was a colony world, he began. His voice was flat and distant, like he was reading from a book written in his own blood. 2 million people. Farmers, mostly. Families. Children. It was supposed to be safe. Far from any danger. A good place to build a life. He paused, and the Sara waited. The hegemony swarm came without warning. You probably do not know them. They were before your people started paying attention to humans. Insect creatures, billions of them, moving from world to world, eating everything in their path. They did not negotiate. They did not take prisoners. They just consumed. Marcus closed his eyes. I was 22 years old. a combat engineer in the 7th Terran Shock Infantry. We were stationed on Helios 4 for training exercises. 13 of us. Just kids, really. We thought we were soldiers, but we had never seen real war. He opened his eyes and looked at the suit that bore his name. When the swarm arrived, there was no time to evacuate everyone. The colony had one mountain pass that led to the emergency spaceport. If the swarm got through that pass, they would reach the civilians before the ships could take off. 2 million people would die. Desara felt cold. She had seen war. She had seen death. But something in Marcus's voice told her she had never seen anything like Helios 4. Command ordered us to hold the pass. 6 hours, they said. Just hold for 6 hours and the civilians would be safe. Then, evac ships would come for us too. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. 6 hours. We thought we could do that. We were young and stupid, and we believed in heroes. He stood up and walked to the first suit of armor in the circle. A young woman's face smiled from the hollow picture beside it. Private Sarah Chan. She was the best shot in our unit. She wanted to be a teacher after her service ended. She lasted until day 3. He moved to the next suit. A man with kind eyes and a crooked smile. Corporal James Okonkwo. He told the worst jokes I have ever heard. He kept us laughing when we wanted to scream. Day 4. One by one, Marcus walked the circle, touching each suit, speaking each name. Private Rodriguez, who sang old Earth songs during the long nights. Sergeant Williams, who led from the front until a swarm blade took his legs. Private Tanaka, who was only 19 and had never kissed anyone. Private Morrison, who prayed every night to a god Marcus had stopped believing in. 12 names. 12 faces. 12 friends who walked into that mountain pass as soldiers and never walked out. The evac ships did not come after 6 hours, Marcus said. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. They did not come after 12 hours. Or 24. Or 48. Something had gone wrong. Communications were down. We did not know if anyone was coming at all. He returned to the center of the room, standing before his own scarred armor. But we could hear the civilians behind us. Children crying. Parents praying. 2 million people with nowhere to run. So we kept fighting. Desara spoke for the first time. How did you survive? 13 soldiers against a swarm? Marcus smiled, and it was the saddest thing she had ever seen. I am an engineer. I fix things. And it turns out, I am very good at breaking things too. He told her about the mining equipment he turned into weapons. The cargo haulers he converted into rolling artillery. The fuel tanks he rigged to explode. The trenches he dug. The traps he built. Every day, he found new ways to kill the enemy. Every night, he held together machines that should have fallen apart, coaxing life from engines that had no right to run. But it was not enough, he said. No matter how many I killed, more came. And one by one, my friends fell. His voice broke for the first time. I was there for all of them. Sarah died in my arms. James bled out while I tried to stop the bleeding with my bare hands. Morrison was calling for his mother at the end. He was 23 years old, and he wanted his mother. Desara felt tears on her face. She had not cried in decades. On day 9, rescue finally came. A fleet had broken through the swarm's blockade. The civilians were safe. 2 million people alive because we held that pass. Marcus looked at his hands, scarred and calloused from decades of work. And I was the only one left. Standing in a field of bodies, surrounded by the broken machines that had kept us alive, completely alone. He looked up at Desara. They wanted to give me medals. They wanted to call me a hero. I told them no. Heroes do not let their friends die. Heroes bring everyone home. Desara reached out and touched his arm. You saved 2 million people, and I lost 12. The 12 people who trusted me, who followed me, who died while I lived." He shook his head. "That is not heroism. That is failure." They sat in silence for a long time. The holopictures played their loops, showing faces that would never grow old. Finally, the Zara asked the question that had been burning in her heart. "Why ships? Why did you become an engineer after all of that?" Marcus looked at the suits of armor, at the faces of his fallen friends. "Because ships carry people, just like I tried to carry them. And if I can keep the ships flying, maybe the people inside will get home safe. Maybe somewhere, because of something I fixed, a soldier makes it back to his family. A child sees her father again. A mother does not have to bury her son." He turned to face her, and his eyes were the eyes of a man who had been fighting a war for 40 years. "Every engine I repair is an apology. Every ship I save is a prayer. This is all I know how to do, this Zara. It is the only way I know to make their deaths mean something." The Zara stood. She was 3 centuries old. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had known warriors and kings and legends, but she had never met anyone like Marcus Cole. "You have been honoring them alone all this time," she said softly, "carrying this weight by yourself. Does that not grow heavy?" Marcus looked at the circle of armor, at the faces of his friends, at the memorial he had built with his own hands. "Yes," he said, "but they carried me for 9 days. I can carry them for the rest of my life." The Zara left the room without another word. Her ship was waiting. Her summit was calling. But as she walked back to the Ascendant Grace, she knew that something had changed. She had come to this station thinking she understood the galaxy. Now she realized she had barely begun to see it, and she knew, with absolute certainty, that she could not keep this story to herself. The galaxy needed to know about Marcus Cole. The Grand Assembly Chamber on Kiros Prime had not been this full in 100 years. Representatives from 12 galactic powers sat in their designated sections, surrounded by advisors, guards, and recording devices that would broadcast every word to 1 trillion watching beings. Hi, Envoy the Zara stood at the central podium, looking out at the sea of faces. The summit was supposed to be about trade agreements and border disputes, the endless small conflicts that threatened to become large wars. She had prepared remarks about compromise and cooperation, careful words designed to offend no one. She set those remarks aside. "I was recently stranded at Nexus Station," she began. Her voice carried through the vast chamber, amplified by ancient Kirith technology. "My ship had failed. My engineers could not repair it, and I was forced to ask for help from a human." A murmur rippled through the assembly. The Kirith did not ask for help. Everyone knew that. "I will admit," the Zara continued, "that I was not pleased. Humans are a young species. They have been flying among the stars for barely 3 centuries. My people built interstellar vessels when humans were still learning to use fire. I thought I was lowering myself by accepting his assistance." She paused, letting the silence build. "I was wrong." The chamber went completely still. "The human engineer fixed my ship in 18 hours. He improved our drive efficiency by 12%. He found flaws in our design that our greatest minds had missed for centuries. But that is not why I stand before you today." The Zara looked out at the gathered representatives. Beings from species that have been at war for generations. Species that distrusted each other. Species that thought humans were too young, too primitive, too small to matter. His name is Marcus Cole. 40 years ago, when most of your species were not paying attention to humanity, a colony world called Helios 4 was attacked by the hegemony swarm. 2 million civilians were trapped. The only thing between them and death was a mountain pass defended by 13 human soldiers. She told them the story. She told him about the 6 hours that became 9 days, about the mining equipment turned into weapons, the impossible repairs, the endless waves of enemies, about 12 young soldiers who died one by one, refusing to retreat, refusing to surrender, refusing to let 2 million innocent people be slaughtered. Marcus Cole was the only survivor, the Sara said. He was 22 years old. He watched everyone he loved die in that pass. And when rescue finally came, when they offered him medals and honors and recognition, he refused. He said heroes bring everyone home. And he had failed. Her voice grew stronger. For 40 years, that man has worked alone in a forgotten docking bay, fixing ships that other engineers throw away. He has never spoken of what he did. He has never asked for recognition. He built a memorial to his fallen friends and tends it in secret, carrying their memory alone because he believes he does not deserve company in his grief. Zara stepped out from behind the podium and walked toward the center of the chamber. I have lived for 3 centuries. I have known warriors and legends and kings. I have seen courage in many forms, but I have never seen anything like Marcus Cole. She turned to face the assembly, and her ancient eyes burned with conviction. You ask why the Kirith should recognize humanity as equals. You worry that they are too young, too new, too different. Let me tell you what I have learned. Her voice rose until it filled every corner of that vast chamber. Humans live short lives. 80 years, perhaps 100 if they are lucky. They do not have our technology or our history or our power. But they have something we do not. They have the ability to carry impossible weights, to hold the line when all hope is lost, to transform grief into service and loss into love. She pointed toward the great windows that looked out on the stars. Somewhere out there, in a forgotten corner of a trade station, a human man is fixing another ship. He's doing it because 40 years ago, he could not save his friends. And he has spent every day since trying to earn the life they gave him. He has never stopped serving. He has never stopped honoring the dead. And he has never, ever asked for anything in return. Zara walked back to the podium and placed her hands on its surface. That is humanity. Not their technology. Not their military. Not their short lives or their strange customs. Their spirit. Their impossible, beautiful, heartbreaking spirit. She looked directly at the recording devices, knowing that her words would reach across the galaxy. Equal? You ask if humans are equals? I tell you now, equals would be generous to us. She stepped down from the podium, and the chamber erupted. 6 months later, a Velith freighter docked at Bay 7. The captain was nervous as he walked into the workshop, holding a small package in his hands. Are you Marcus Cole? He asked. Marcus looked up from the engine he was repairing. I am. I was asked to deliver this. And to tell you something. The captain held out the package. The High Envoy sends her regards. She says the galaxy finally knows. Marcus frowned. Knows what? The captain did not answer. He just smiled and walked away. Marcus opened the package. Inside was a data chip and a small note. Watch this. Then look outside. He played the chip. It was a recording of the Tsar's speech at the summit. He watched it alone in his workshop, and when it ended, his hands were shaking. Then he walked to the main entrance of docking, Bay 7, and opened the doors. The corridor outside was full of people. Karn captains, Velith traders, Methany engineers, Kirith diplomats, beings from a dozen species standing in a line that stretched down the hallway and around the corner. Some held flowers. Some held small tokens of respect. Some simply stood with their heads bowed. They had come for the memorial. Word had spread after the Tsar's speech. The story of Helios 4 had reached every corner of the galaxy. And somehow, without Marcus knowing, visitors had started arriving at Nexus Station. They came to see the place where the human engineer worked. They came to honor the soldiers who had held the line. Marcus stood in the doorway, unable to speak, unable to move. He had spent 40 years hiding his grief, carrying his debt alone, believing that no one would understand. He had been wrong. The Velith dockmaster appeared beside him. "They've been asking about the memorial. I told them I would have to get your permission." He paused. "They have been waiting for 3 days." Marcus looked at the crowd, at the faces of beings who had come from across the galaxy to honor 12 humans they had never met. Slowly, he stepped aside. One by one, they entered. They walked through his workshop, through the small quarters, through the sealed door that was no longer sealed. They stood in the circle of armor and looked at the faces of the fallen. They read the names. They touched the dog tags. They wept. A car and freighter crew left a wreath of flowers from their homeworld. A methany engineer placed a small crystal that glowed with soft light. A Kirith diplomat, old and proud, knelt before the armor of Private Sarah Chan and whispered a prayer in a language Marcus did not understand. They kept coming. For days, for weeks, they kept coming. And Marcus stood in his workshop and watched them pass, tears streaming down his face. On the last day, a crew of Velith workers arrived with a large metal plate. They asked Marcus his permission to add it to the memorial. He nodded, not trusting his voice to speak. They welded the new plaque beside the original, and Marcus read the words, Helios 4. They held the line. The galaxy remembers. That night, Marcus sat alone in the memorial room. The armor of his friends surrounded him, just as it had for 40 years. But something was different now. For 4 decades, he had carried them in silence. He had believed that his grief was his alone, that no one else could understand, that his only purpose was to keep fixing ships until his hands could no longer hold a wrench. But the galaxy had proven him wrong. Strangers had crossed the stars to honor his friends. Beings who had never known them, who had never seen Earth, who had nothing in common with humanity except a simple recognition that some things are worth. Remembering Marcus looked at the faces in the holopictures. Sarah, with her steady aim and her dream of being a teacher. James, with his terrible jokes and his kind heart. All 12 of them, young and brave and forever gone. "You have witnesses now," he said softly. "The whole galaxy knows what you did, what you gave." He pressed his palm against his own scarred armor, feeling the old metal, remembering the weight of it during those 9 endless days. "I'm sorry it took so long. I'm sorry I kept you to myself. But you are not forgotten anymore. You will never be forgotten again." For the first time in 40 years, Marcus Cole wept without grief. He wept with gratitude. And somewhere, in that small room surrounded by the armor of heroes, he finally began to heal.